I think the mindset is really important as well. Like, which Ray only had 5 and 7 days in Hong Kong. Which
It's not too bad.
It's not too bad. But 21 days, your mental health you need to really take care of.
And I can relate, you know, like, but during the time where, you know, the rest of the world is opening up, and with social media, the feeling of you know, stuck in a room, even though you have like really good facility, you're well fed, you feel like you're really missing out, you know, especially when you're quarantined during public holidays and you see everyone going out because things are opening up. But if, like, let's say like there's still no dine-ins after 6 and everything, you'd be like, that's fine, yeah, I work from home after 6, everybody's at home anyway.
This is Andrian.
And this is Ray. Welcome to the Talk Lab podcast.
Every 2 weeks, we'll invite a new guest and
In every session, we'll dig into their life, relationships, and perspectives.
one question at a time.
Let's talk lab!
Yay. Welcome to the Talk Lab podcast. This is Andrian.
And this is Ray.
Long time no see. I've been in the background for quite a while. And finally, Ray is back after his trip to Singapore and Malaysia. That's why we're going to segue into his traveling experience for the past, month or two?
I think 5 weeks
Wow.
of travel, yeah.
In the middle of COVID. So we're privileged to have Ray with us today.
No, I think long time no see, Andrian, especially on Talk Lab podcast. Thanks for free riding. But just to give an idea.
Wait. Thanks for free riding.
No, I think I just want to set some context that Andrian has been instrumental on putting, you know, the podcast together on the back end. So he's really the guy that put all the editing, the post editing and stuff. Yeah, so really appreciate Andrian still being actively in the podcast.
You make it sound like I'm so inactive. Okay, but anyways, so we're gonna jump right into traveling. But then Ray actually traveled to 5 weeks traveled to Malaysia and Singapore, and then he came back to Hong Kong with quarantine. So it's a really interesting experience because during this middle of COVID, he can still travel. So we're just gonna ask him. So why did you even travel for so long? To be honest.
Yeah, I think obviously we're gonna touch on all different things. Yeah, but I think let's set the stage for the audience on, you know, why suddenly this dude called Ray is able to travel during COVID, right? Yeah, so I think just to give more context on why I'm required to travel, because nobody wants to travel during COVID, especially if you're from Hong Kong and based in Hong Kong. It's basically a mess, right? Because Hong Kong is still really pushing for dynamic zero kind of COVID, which is not realistic, but I don't think we should deep dive into, you know, how governments handle the things. But essentially, I just completed a role change. Yeah, so basically I left Microsoft, if you heard from the different episodes, and I just started a new job in a company, data and AI startup called Databricks.
Woo!
Yeah, so from from that, I also tried to maximize, you know, the last day at Microsoft and make sure I had enough time to rest, regroup myself, spend time with family before really starting my role at Databricks. And why there's like multi-city kind of travel is because, number one, my role is actually in Singapore, but I'll be covering Hong Kong customers. So because of that nature, I'm required to start my role in Singapore because I'm under the employment pass. Number two, why I decided to, you know, have the opportunity to be in Kuala Lumpur is because, like what I mentioned, right? It's been like 2 years of just staying in Hong Kong, not meeting family. So I really took the opportunity to squeeze in some time to make sure, like, I think it's 2.5 weeks in Kuala Lumpur. So I was really grateful for that. And that's why there's like this kind of context of this multi-city travel. So from Hong Kong to Kuala Lumpur to Singapore, and Singapore to Hong Kong. So in between that, I think we can deep dive onto, you know, the whole experiences, which, yeah, Andrian will walk me through. Yeah, you asked me. Yeah, ask me.
I'm the host today. But sounds like Ray has a really eventful trip. If you look at his Malai Jai fitness channel or his own private Ray channel, you can see that he's been to so many places. He's gone viral as well, which we're gonna talk about that later. So in this episode, we're gonna keep it short because previously Ray in Malaysia is recording outrageously long episodes for like 30, 50, 1 hour episodes. So this time we're trying to keep it like 20 minutes. So we have still 17 minutes left. So this episode we're going to split into pre-trip, when he landed, and when he's meeting people. Because throughout the whole experience, he actually experienced quite a few things in KL and Singapore and stuff like that when meeting people. So hopefully this is going to be informative but interesting for you. So first part, we're going to do the more informative part. So what do you do before trip? Because I think when there's COVID, you still need to do a lot of things. You need to book your ticket, but very differently, right? Compared to previously when you can redeem with miles and stuff like that. So what do you need to do beforehand with pre-trip?
Yeah, so I think before diving into the tips or the things that I did pre-trip during this travel period in COVID, it's just want to make sure we set the context right. That actually, just a disclaimer that because I only traveled in Hong Kong to Singapore, Malaysia, and back to Hong Kong, etc. And in COVID, like all the regulations is always changing on the go, right? So throughout the trip, yeah, literally, like you have to stay updated on a daily basis or 3 days before you fly and check what's the latest regulation to make it, because there's some changes that happen in between which I can go through more later, but just want to set this disclaimer clear. And I think it's a really, really fun topic, and thank you, Andrian, for suggesting it, because it's really relevant, I think, today. Even though the regulations and the pre-trip tips will not be super relevant because it's really time sensitive, right? But I think like everyone is interested in dying to really travel and really understand what it is like to travel during this period of COVID. What's the planning required, the anxiousness, the nervousness, the excitement behind it. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because what we thought of this topic is because during this period, a lot of people wanted to travel, but then we can also look back into this time and thinking how crazy it is to travel. What kind of hassle do you need to go through just to be on a plane? So what do you need to do before getting on a plane?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things, but since you touched on the feeling, the newness, the freshness, right? So the first time me traveling from the Uber to Hong Kong International Airport for a flight, that was pretty surreal for me. I was like, whoa, I'm actually going there for a flight. And this time it's a flight, not for a customer meeting, like covering Hong Kong Airport as a customer, right? So that was like there's some newness in that. And then going through the process was very new. Of course, before that I had the preparations, which I'll dive through, but I just want to touch on this feeling of newness has been quite... Yeah, it was an interesting feeling that I felt like, oh my god, it's been more than 2 years since I've stepped into an airport, stepped into a flight. And yeah, there was times where you feel like, oh my god, you feel insecure, right? Because this COVID thing, like touch wood, yeah, basically, I think we are blessed that we haven't got COVID before, and we hope to be able to stay this way. But being able to travel, being in the airplane, you feel that you have you're paranoid that you get exposed to a lot of things, because just the idea of being in an airport, in a plane, you'll be like, oh my god, this is a COVID zone. Yeah, but it's not as bad as what it is, and yeah, life goes on really. Yeah, so diving back to the pre-trip, right? So there's quite a few things that you need to prepare before you actually travel during this COVID time. And I think it's the same thing as pre-COVID. You still need to get your hotels, you still need to get your flight ticket. But the additional point or part that you need to look into is regulations on whether, the destination country, do they have any quarantine measures? When you come back from Hong Kong, do you need to book quarantine hotels? How many weeks? So these are the additional logistics that you do. So I think like buying the flight and everything is no problem. It's the quarantine hotel in Hong Kong, because it's quite a long stay, 14 days back then. But now, if you're listening to this now, it's 7 days. In the future, if you're listening, maybe it's a few days or 0.
Or home quarantine.
There's
a rumor.
That's ideal, yeah. So the quarantine hotel was the biggest pain for me, especially when you want to travel out of Hong Kong, because you need to figure out when you're going to come back to Hong Kong and book and make sure you book a quarantine hotel. Yeah, back then it was strict, right? You need to know have a quarantine hotel booked before you fly out. But I think now when I was like going back and stuff, it's not, they don't really check it until you arrive in Hong Kong International Airport, and then there's like, okay, which hotel do you quarantine at? So quarantine hotel is the biggest piece, and then there's how do I get over it, right? You have to be resourceful, because I asked friends that basically travel. Yeah, because I'm a lazy guy. I don't want to search everything on my own. Andrian probably would like to search everything on his own, but I asked people. And then they led on me to the links. So there's like a list of hotels that it's available for quarantine. And basically I cold call. Okay, not cold call, but...
Like call them one by one.
One
see
by
if they
one,
have space.
But first, really go to different Facebook group. So I think in Hong Kong, it's like Hong Kong Quarantine Support Group. Yeah. So there's a lot of reviews, people posting food, posting the room size. So room size was a big factor for me because I wanted to do many things in the room, right? Home workout, you want to have a good space, good view. And of course, within the budget, right? Because it's expensive, right? But on average, it's around 800 to 1,000. I think you can get a decent room in Hong Kong, yeah. And location to me doesn't matter. So I chose Nina Chin 1 because you're quarantined anyway, right? You can't go out, so it doesn't matter where you are. And when you leave, you just take cab to your home anyway. Yeah, so hotels are one, flights is simple. And the other main important thing is really on the PCR test or the ART test, right? So you need to make sure so typically it's like 72 hours or 48 hours before the flight, you need to do a test. Yeah, just to validate that, okay, you are negative before you can get on and board on that plane. So this part was also quite uncertain for me. So I think 2 weeks before I left and flew to Malaysia, I was like, okay, I'm not going to meet people. Yeah, I don't want to get, COVID. I don't want to be positive, and my plan basically get pushed back. So that's one of the things that, you need to sort of prepare because it's so easy to get COVID.
Yeah.
No matter what, you're boosted, not boosted. As long as you step out the door of your house and meet someone random, or even don't meet anyone, right? Because even if you order delivery and stuff, there is a risk to get. Yeah. So there's a story by Matt. I'm not sure know Matt. But anyway, his friend basically was super paranoid about COVID. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to stay at home for 2 weeks, right? Because in Korea, I think it's like 30, 40,000 cases a day.
Yeah.
And basically, he just camped at home. But he got COVID. And because he said it must be the delivery guy. So that's risk. So that even when you leave the house, stay at home, there is going to be a risk. So that mindset of post-pandemic or endemic life, everybody should have that mindset that we all bound together, but we just need to have the right set of mind that, we should take extra precaution no matter what.
Yeah.
And if you do get it, then you've done your best.
Yeah.
And
it's fate.
It's fate for sure. Yeah. So that's basically 3 things: hotel, flights, and doing the test before that, because there's a lot of paperwork.
So I guess that's really good tips already. Like to also print everything, right? I saw what you wrote is to print everything. But then when you land, are you required, like you land in Singapore and Malaysia, right?
So thanks for raising this, right? So just to give more context, I took the flight. So because I'm doing multi-city, so I couldn't buy like a return ticket. So flight, you can imagine if you buy a multi-city kind of flights one way, it's gonna be expensive. But I already anticipated that it's gonna be expensive for me to do it. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna do quarantine hotel. It's worth it. Yeah. And so I took one way journey to Singapore, transit there for like 4 hours, and then flew from Singapore to KL. So that's the first leg.
Because there is no direct flight from Hong Kong to KL.
There is. With Malaysia, not Malaysia Airlines. I think Cathay Pacific there is, but the frequency is really bad, once in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I really needed to get back so that I can fulfill 14 days in Malaysia. Because back then, so I'm gonna bring in it's not new concepts, it's old concepts now.
It's still happening, I think.
Yeah, you need to be in a location for 14 days consecutively, tested negative before
you can enter Singapore.
Exactly, freely. So I was playing around with that. Yeah, so there was obviously, ideally, it would be best if I had a direct flight to Malaysia, but just all the airlines, the flights didn't work out, so I took Singapore Airlines, to Singapore to Malaysia, and one of the legs was Scoot, because it's a code share or something like that.
And then afterwards, you flew back to Singapore, or you car ride to Singapore?
I flew back because last time, it's a very interesting time. So that time, basically the time where I traveled, different countries were starting to open up. So you can imagine all the regulations are changing, and whatever plans that I made still was correct. But it's just like I could have saved so much money, but who knew, right?
Yeah.
So I went from from Hong Kong to KL around 14 March. That's my flight.
Okay.
Yeah. But on 1st April, when I actually flew to Singapore, they basically opened up the borders between Malaysia and Singapore. So, yeah.
So back then, when you booked, you couldn't take the road.
Yep, land was closed.
Yeah, land was closed. But then when you reach there at that day, you can actually go by road. But then you already booked your ticket already.
Yep, and I booked like the VTL, which stands for Vaccinated Travel Lane.
Yeah, I asked him what's that.
So yeah,
what was that actually?
So Vaccinated Travel Lane is basically a agreement between two places and the airline. Basically, you need an airline to be registered as a VTL flight, Vaccinated Travel Lane kind of flight. And what this means is like, okay, when you fly from let's say Hong Kong to Malaysia, if you're under the VTL and you are vaccinated, boosted, whatever the requirement is, typically it's 2 doses, but I think now it's like boosted, then it's considered you can join the VTL. So VTL means like once you get off the flight, assuming you're negative on the flight, you don't have to quarantine locally. So it applies because last time I think it was a way to isolate people that really were vaccinated and don't want to go through quarantine. Then they go through this VTL. But the flight tickets are at a premium.
How much more?
So I cannot speak for all, but I think I can speak for at least
your experience.
The experience from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore. So typically it's around 200 Hong Kong dollars for a one-way flight. But I paid like 2,000 for a VTL flight because I didn't want to quarantine in Singapore because I really need to get out to start my onboarding my role, right? So it was 10 times, but I was like, okay, I really need to start my work and everything. And I did it and I booked it and I thought it was just no value. It was a ripped-off, but I was like, regulation during COVID, you just cannot bend the rules.
Yeah.
So I booked it and and on my flight was on 1st April. On 31st March, they said, okay, we don't need any VTL flights to Singapore because they're really opening up. So every day, the regulations was changing. So it's very, very interesting time to be in, especially when I was traveling then. But yeah, that's another tip is that you need to be very flexible with your travel plans. And if you are planning to travel during COVID, you need to be ready and prepared to pay a premium. Because when things change, borders start closing up, borders start opening up, you need to adapt your travel plans.
Yeah, you need to change it immediately.
Yep.
But then it was, I saw that there was a huge line going from KL to Singapore, right? There's a huge traffic jam on the road.
This is by land, right?
Yeah.
By land is typically the most economical, cost efficient.
But $200 for a flight is actually really cheap. That I didn't know. Okay, but now let's move on to when you landed. So you need to, just now you said, like after you land, you need to do something as well. Do you need to do a PCR or do any swab when you landed in KL or in Singapore?
Yeah, so I think right now it might be very different, but from my time, so all this I would say when you landed and everything, pre-trip and everything, I would bucket it the same way because the time window is very short.
Yeah,
and you have to prepare everything in advance. It's better to prepare everything in advance, or else you need to pay a premium. So I basically booked the landing test private, like in developing countries. I would say like if you're a testing kind of company that can do tests, it's a money booming industry.
Yeah,
it's like a market. So in Malaysia, you can either use a government one which you queue and that's free, or you pay a premium to do the test very quickly without queue, and they treat you like VIP, have a dedicated line. So my parents gave me that option and say, oh, it's going to be much better and stuff. So I was blessed to, money can solve things, and I got a new role, decided to let's streamline things a bit. So I went through this BP Healthcare, which is like the healthcare entity in Malaysia that won the tender to do this kind of testing swabs in the airports, and they have a network in the cities too. So I did that and it's very smooth. Within 10-15 minutes everything's done.
And then you got your result already.
Results, they will still because it's PCR, right? So it still needs some time.
So you need to stay in the airport for that moment, or you can just leave already.
You can just leave.
Oh, so as long as you finish your test you can leave.
And there's my understanding. I'm just thinking like it doesn't make sense this way, but from what I remember, like I did it and then straight away I could go to the immigration. Because essentially, I only get the results in my Malaysia's version of Ong San Chok Hang. 1-2 days later.
Okay.
So, but you're expected to do home quarantine. So back then in Malaysia, it's like after you do the test, you get out from the airport. You're not supposed to take a Grab. Grab is like Uber in Southeast Asia. I took a Grab anyway. Yeah, you're supposed to take a thing, but there's a lot of loopholes here and there, right? But I'm like, whatever that makes it, as long as you don't you think wisely about what you do, right? As long as like the loopholes, you take it accordingly. Yeah, so I took the Grab. It's just much easier. I don't want to pay a markup at the dedicated.
There's also a dedicated car.
No, there isn't, but there must be a certain route that you have to follow. But I just listened to my mom to just do this, man. Yeah,
like less mafan.
Because you get tagged, right? And then she say, oh, please don't get tagged. Yeah.
What does it mean by
get tagged? Basically, it's just like Hong Kong. Last time when you actually quarantine, you need to wear a
wristband. Yeah,
exactly. So Malaysia, there's this concept when you actually flying in, you get tagged. But then I realized on that day or like few days before, the regulation changed, right? So everyone is not required to be tagged. Okay. Because that tag is like after you finish the home quarantine, you need to go to a dedicated clinic to do the test, another PCR or ART test. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just more complicated.
Yep.
If you got tagged.
Yep.
So you didn't get tagged and stuff like that. So when you landed, you just mentioned you got a 7-day quarantine. So what do you do in a 7-day quarantine?
So I think Malaysia is pretty chill, right? Because homes in Malaysia are generally quite big or bigger. I mean, it's just like
it's raised
like in Malaysia, like just having a landed house is pretty common, I would say.
Okay.
In Hong Kong, it's like, oh my god, are you Li Ka-sheng or who, whatever, right? Mansion, yeah. But yeah, so just based on that, they're quite flexible. No one will come to check you. You are supposed to isolate yourself in the room, which I did. I just come up for home workouts and eat sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, that's you serve your home quarantine for 5 days, and on day 5, everything is like green on the app, blue on the app. Blue means it's okay. Red or yellow means they color code you in Malaysia. Yeah. So once you are blue, and then you can basically scan to different places and enter. Yeah.
So it's basically in Malaysia, there's also like a code scanning system.
Yeah.
So you need to scan to enter like different venues.
Exactly. So just to give some context, because I've in my phone now, I have 3 apps just to do this tracing or like SOP, standard operating procedures during COVID. So, and I would say like Hong Kong's version of the On Sam Chok Hang Leave Home Safe app is quite basic compared to the other countries. So I'm like pretty impressed with, like, even for Malaysia, it's so complex, man. Like,
what, like how?
They would give like statistics as a dashboard on how many number of cases and everything, and are you low risk and close contact, this kind of stuff. It's very sophisticated. And in Singapore, it's like similar thing too. Yeah, it's called Trace Together. So I thought like, oh wow, I'm learning something new, right? Like, but obviously, you need to always, like, everything you have to scan.
Yeah.
And you can see like the uptake of this kind of apps during post-COVID pandemic. It's really, really interesting, and the pushback from different places are just different. Yeah. So that's an interesting phenomenon that
I think it's also encouraged people to get more aware on how to use QR code actually, somehow. So maybe if anyone's thinking of any QR code business, I think it's time to do it.
Yeah, so in Singapore, fun fact, right? You don't even need a QR code.
Oh.
It's NFC.
NFC.
Exactly.
Push it.
Yeah.
Ah.
But I was from using the On Sam Chok Hang, so I was like, okay, I still scan. I still pull up, but people will just like do it and then go
But NFC is much easier. But anyways, that's another episode. So, but I put down something, is that if you're traveling to China, which some of my colleagues are doing, you're required to do a 14 plus 7 days quarantine, which means you need to quarantine for a total 21 days.
That's almost a month, man. Yeah.
That's almost a month. And if you need to switch a hotel, it makes it 22 days. And then some of the cities, you cannot even like pick your own hotels. You just lucky draw. So sometimes you might go to a really, really crappy hotel, which is one of the experience of the colleagues of mine. And then I think the mindset is really important as well. Like, which Ray only have 5 and 7 days in Hong Kong. Which
it's not too bad.
It's not too bad. But 21 days, your mental health you need to really take care of.
And I can relate. Like, I think I really got a discount because I was traveling at a time where things are loosening up. So I actually booked my quarantine hotel for 14 days. Yeah.
Do you get like refunded?
Of course.
Okay, thank God.
So that was good for me. Like when I first April, Hong Kong announced that, you only required 7 days. And I was like, oh my God. Number one, I not only save money, but that was the thing that I can save money. Yeah, but my mind was prepared for 2 weeks before that.
It's much more relaxed. It's just like 7 days you can go back home is much happier.
But I have like a perspective. I thought 7 days was okay, and it actually is okay. But during the time where, you know, the rest of the world is opening up, and with social media, the feeling of you know, stuck in a room, even though you have like really good facility, you're well fed. I love the quarantine life. There's a lot of time for you to think and work on things that you never worked on before, like, you know, building the podcast, or like the Malai Chai, fitness, posting reels, this kind of stuff. But it's just, you feel like you're really missing out, you know, especially when you're quarantining during public holidays and you see everyone going out because things are opening up. But if like, let's say like there's still no dine-ins after 6 and everything, you'd be like, that's fine, yeah, I work from home after 6, everybody's at home anyway. Yeah, so in China, I think 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, when you say 21 days quarantine, people will still like, yeah, let's do it, man. Yeah, I'm gonna visit a new place and everything. But now, you get just bombarded by social media and everything, and you see like 21 days is actually a large trade-off today. Yeah. Because 21 days, that time, you can do so many things, and now...
Like, I think Hong Kong is opening up in a way that, okay, 7 days is not too bad. And people are actually going to like Bangkok, and like some people are going to Sydney and stuff like that. You went to Singapore and Malaysia when a lot of people are stuck here. So I think it's one of the mindset that you see people, you envy them, and you're thinking, why am I stuck here for 21 days, man? Yeah. So that's basically it. But then that's probably where we're gonna cut off on our first episode. I don't want to.
Let's just finish it,
No, we're gonna do it in the next episode, so we can drag people on to watch next. All right, see you then. Bye.
All right, with Andrian's call, we end this episode. So if you found it helpful, if you get some new perspective from it, feel free to, you know, comment, DM us on our Talkla podcast Instagram. We're on YouTube if you want to see our faces, our interactions. Yeah, so appreciate the support, and yeah, very happy to have you on board again, Andrian.
We and us.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.